Sure. Good evening. Yeah. Oh, my. Okay.
Good to see you, man. Yeah, that's been great. I'm like, we got the other day, I should get a call.
Yeah. Let's hope not. I know. Yeah. Amazing.
Oh.
I'm not gonna get that. We all do it.
Of all people, who should be playing? See what happens.
Before we start the meeting tonight, can I ask everyone that's joining us virtually to please put your computers on mute? I call this meeting to order. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Lunder,
Here.
Mr. Johnson,
Here.
Mr. Bittner,
Here.
Mr. Wolf,
Here.
Mr. Shaboo,
Here.
Mr. Morris,
Here.
Mrs. Thompson,
Here. Approval of minutes from October 12th.
So made. Seconded.
Motion made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Abstain.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Wolf, Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye. Clerk, do you have any correspondence this evening?
I have no correspondence tonight, Madam President.
Anyone on council with correspondence this evening? Administrative and department head reports, Mayor and Safety Director, Mary Eva. Good evening.
Good evening, Mrs. Thompson, members of council, public here this evening. Legislation tonight, I would ask council to consider suspending the rules on resolutions 2021 R-25 and 2021 R-26. This will allow us to send the required documentation to the Lake County Reutilization Corporation or the Lake County Land Bank in order to get these properties demolished as soon as possible. Also, with the retirement of our service director, Mr. Moore, we would like to reevaluate the duties and responsibilities of the service department. Ordinance 2021-0-28 adjusts the compensation of our service department employees currently employed under those job categories. These individuals have the experience and knowledge to handle additional responsibility and should be compensated accordingly. Our city's trick or treat will be held on Sunday, October 31st from 6 to 8 p.m. We will have additional officers on duty that night. Make sure the kids are safe. Our Parks and Recreation Board members will be helping the Lake Elementary PTA with the school's trunk or treat Halloween event on Thursday, October 28th from 5:30 to 6:30. Council members are welcome to join us as we will be having a panel to judge the costume contest. The tent will be set up and the event will happen rain or shine. received a memo from Chief Beelan dated October 13th in regards to the Safety Forces Open House. The following individuals with the police department participated in that event. Sergeant Davenant Meyer, Patrolman Messenger, Patrolman Higginbotham, Patrolman Rodniak, Patrolman Terrell, Patrolman Matricola, and also Communications Officer McPeak. As Chief writes here, your involvement in representing our department is certainly appreciated. Employees like you reflect the dedication and professionalism of the Maryland Lake Police Department, and this certainly makes you valuable members of our team. Thank you again. Also dated October 26th, 2021. Patrol Officer Andrew Mastricola participated in the second annual Lake County Safety Forces Trunk or Treat event. Chief was thanking him. This happened on Sunday, October 24th at Captain Stadium in Eastlake. Your involvement was most certainly appreciated, Andrew. Employees that you reflect the dedication and professionalism of the Maryland Lake Police Department. Who's our report?
Thank you. Administrative Director, Ms. Bartone, good evening.
The only additional request I have is for ordinance number 2021-0-29. Those are repeat grass cuttings for the season, so if that could be passed and it's be certified, I appreciate it.
Law Director, Mr. Lyons, good evening.
Good evening, Madam President. I have no report.
Thank you. Service Director, Mr. Moore, good evening.
Good evening, Madam President. I have no reports.
Do we have any questions to administration and department heads at this time? Hearing none, we'll move on. Board and committee commission reports, planning and zoning.
It was canceled. Before.
The report. Ordinance committee.
Yes, we met on October 18th. We started at 6 p.m. In attendance was myself, Robert Johnson, Preston Wolf, Desiree Thompson, Paul Moore, Jim Lunder, the mayor, Dave Beetham, Michelle Moore, and Skip Gray. Discussed 4 different ordinances. First one is the parking penalty. The committee agreed to add to the ordinance the stipulation that a third offense occurring within a 12-month period will result in a fee of $50. If a fourth offense occurs within a 12-month period, the vehicle will be subject to towing. We still have to approve it at the next meeting. The second is the right-of-way, the tree lawn ordinance. Of the 3 proposals being considered, the committee has narrowed it down to 1. And for the sake of clarity, Councilman Rob Johnson will rewrite a portion of that selected proposal. Ordinance 1036 trees. After a brief discussion, the committee chose to table the issue until the next meeting. And ordinance 618.19, the committee agreed to include squirrels on the list of nuisance animals. Our next meeting will be November 15th at 6 p.m.
Any other meetings? Okay, at this time, we will open this portion to the public. If you please step to the lectern and state your name and address for the record. Hearing none, we will close this portion. Legislation before council. Resolution number 2021-R-25. Will you read it by its title, please?
Resolution number 2021-R-25. A resolution authorizing the city of Mineral Lake to proceed with the demolition of an unsafe building located at 5688 Chagrin Drive, Mineral Lake, Ohio, and to request the assistance and cooperation of the Lake County Land Reutilization Corp. In effecting the same and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend,
Discussion.
Mr. Wolf.
Sorry, go ahead with the motions.
Motion to suspend.
So made. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mr. Lunder. Roll call.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Wolf,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye. Discussion.
Yes.
Mr. Wolf.
Mayor, I think you're probably the best qualified to speak on this. It's been a while since we've done one of these. So can you refresh all of our memories on why we use a land bank? What's essential about using a land bank specifically? What happens to the properties? And give us a general overall.
In general, every year we get a memo from John Rogers, who is the director of Land Bank. And what he asks from us is, do we have any properties that we feel are in such bad shape, I guess, is the best way to put it, that we would be interested in taking down. And this property on Chagrin and also the property on Chestnut qualified for that. What the land bank does then is go through title search, right? Do the title search, and then he will search taxes. Do that too. And then go from there.
Is the land bank a government organization, or is it a government entity, or is it private?
Yeah, it's
I can answer that, so.
you're part of it, yes. You're probably better speaking on this than I am.
The land bank is a statutory nonprofit corporation that's formed for the purposes that are contained in its name, is to reutilize land and to try to get it back onto the tax rolls. In order to demolish a piece of property, there was a question about a title search. We do, I haven't been part of this process, but we've done it before, is that we get a limited lien search to find out who are the title owners of the property and who also has a mortgage or other liens against the property. We then notify those group of people by certified mail, telling them that the property is, what specific problems that the property has that cause it to be a nuisance property. We have to give them a period of time in order to fix it up. And if they don't fix it up, then we tell them that we're going to demolish it. Also within that process, there is a note, part of the notice that goes out to them is that they have a right to appeal the determination, that we believe that the property is an unsafe property or a nuisance property. And if they do file an appeal, I don't remember if it's a 20-day notice period or a 30, then there would be a hearing in front of the BZA to determine that. So in order to get to this process, to bring it to council, all of that other work has been done, I assume, and now the final step is for council under our ordinances to declare that this is a unsafe building and that it needs to be demolished. The land bank, once that is done, the land bank is notified, and then the land bank has the funds that they get from, for their funding to hire a contractor and take down the property. And then the land bank then, since they're the one taking down the property, could certify the costs of the demolition to the tax duplicate for that property in an effort to try to recover the property. Many times, because the amount of the demolition exceeds the value of the land, and there's usually also back taxes on the property. The entity that ends up acquiring the property is the land bank, and then the land bank then tries to sell the property in due course of business. So that's what the process is here. So
So you mentioned it was a nonprofit. What's done with the proceeds that are eventually brought in from the sale of the property?
well, let's say that, I think kind of an average demolition cost is $15,000. And so, now, I mean, once the property's been demolished, I'm familiar with the area where both of these properties are, and I would assume that they're smaller lots. So I don't know, and then there's usually back taxes on this. So let's say that there were back taxes of $3,000 and $15,000 of cost to the land bank. Whoever would want to bid $18,001 would be able to get that property. Whoever wanted to bid $22,000 would be able to get that property, because there'd be enough to pay the demolition costs and also the back taxes. The balance of that money over and above, what is owed would then go to, if there's no lien holders, it would go to the property owner, because that would be their property. Okay, at that point in time, I mean, that would be their money. If it goes to the land bank becomes the owner, because nobody has bid on it, and they're the either the state of Ohio through the Lake County Auditor's Office, which they call that it's owned by the state, or the land bank can put its, can notify the court and the prosecutor's office that they want that property. Then they get it, they sell it, they use it to pay their expenses. If they would be lucky enough to sell it for $22,000, and there was that $18,000 of expenses, then that money would be the land bank's money at that point in time. Now, the city in that process has a right to stick its hand out too and say that we want this property. And that has happened in terms of us getting notifications over the years. But we would then have to try to sell it in order to redevelop it. And normally there wouldn't be any money left. Okay, we would have to pay the back taxes. We'd have to pay the land bank. And if there was some extra money in that situation, the city would get it. But it's pretty unlikely in terms of the way these things have unfolded over the years that there is any money that's left over and above the back taxes and the demolition costs.
Thank you.
Motion for passage?
So made. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lunder, seconded by Mr. Johnson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Bittner, Mr. Wolf,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson,
Aye. Resolution number 2021-R-26, will you read it by its title, please?
resolution number 2021-R-26. A resolution authorizing the city of Mentor-on-the-Lake to proceed with the demolition of an unsafe building located at 5525 Chestnut Street, Mentor-on-the-Lake, Ohio, and to request the assistance and cooperation of the Lake County Land Reutilization Corp. In effecting the same and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend.
So made. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Lunder. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Wolf,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye. Motion for passage.
So made.
Seconded.
Motion made by Mr. Lunder, seconded by Mr. Shaboo. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Wolf,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson?
Aye. Ordinance number 2021-0-28, will you read it by title, please?
Ordinance number 2021-0-28. An ordinance to amend the 2021 ordinance providing for the compensation of elected and appointed salaried and hourly employees of the city of Winter-on-the-Lake, repealing any and all other ordinances and parts thereof which may be inconsistent herewith or which may be redundant hereto, and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend?
So made. Seconded.
Motion made by Mr. Lunder, seconded by Mr. Johnson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lunder?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
No.
Mr. Shaboo?
Aye.
Mr. Morris?
No.
Mrs. Thompson?
Aye.
Madam President,
Mr.
what
Morris.
exactly is this for?
There you go.
I'd be interested to see if any council members can explain it, being that
Well, from,
5 votes to.
I think he explained it earlier. If you were listening, he said that instead of hiring a new service director, they're dividing up the duties amongst the current employees, therefore increasing their pay as well.
Correct.
Hey, I paid attention.
Thank you.
I was paying attention to it.
As was I.
I was paying attention to it. But the reason I voted no to suspend the rules is I'd like a little bit more time to look at this and better understand it. Just an explanation why.
Mr. Morris, you got a question?
Yeah, exactly. Who is the zoning department coordinator, the service coordinator? The zoning inspector, we have a housing inspector, I believe, correct?
Sure.
Who is that?
So the zoning department coordinator would become Andrea. She would be in charge of all of the scheduling, day-to-day, keeping everyone on the same page and knowing where they all need to be at any given time. The service coordinator would be Jim. He will take that title on in addition to being the foreman, just because by default, he'll be taking on more responsibility since I can't do all of what Brett does. The zoning inspector would be Chuck, and he would be taking on the permit inspections, those things that go along with going out, checking for permits and approving those. And then the housing inspector, which is already Corey. My interpretation of these guys, when they were hired as operators and service department employees. Over time, that has evolved into assigning someone that housing inspector title, which was not technically what they are hired to do. If they're willing to do this job as supplemental to their job. Now, Corey has been doing it without any argument. I don't feel that it's fair that he do this job in addition to his service department job, operator job. So I would feel better paying them the additional money that they deserve for taking on the extra work.
So what's to stop the fire department or police department from doing the same thing?
In what way?
In the fire department, you have fire inspectors. What's to stop this from extending over to them?
Is from what I know in their contract and their discussions over there, that's agreed to, and that's the way that they operate next door. These are additional duties beyond what they were hired to do.
Well, quite honestly, the fire inspector is an additional duty also.
And that's up to them. And I don't run the fire department.
So basically, the idea is to get away from the service director. And why would we do that?
As it stands now, the mayor and I feel that I can absorb the day-to-day, the phone calls and concerns and issues that come up. Between Brent and I, we were handling them as a team together. So I have a pretty good grasp on the problems and issues that arise generally. Jimmy can handle the service department side and fixing and all of that stuff like he always has in the past. And this is just a trial and error. I don't know that I would feel comfortable hiring somebody in this economic climate right now. Because even talking to the city manager yesterday for Mentor, they have 5 positions open in their road and service departments. And they had maybe 8 people apply for the last couple of months, and they pay significantly more. So I don't want to rush to hire somebody that may not be qualified going into the winter season. So I would rather wait and see come spring if this works. And if it doesn't, we'll come back and ask to rearrange, get rid of the supplemental, and we'll hire a service director.
Mr. Wolf.
So you'll be the one that they report directly to.
Yes.
And will you also be managing the day-to-day activities of those that are not on this list? As far as
Yes.
what tasks are getting done,
Right.
things like that.
It'll be a collective group effort. They all know that we talked about it as a group with the department. Everyone seems to be open to the idea that this will work if we have a central place for, and that everything that needs to be done. Rick seems to be on board.
Mr. Moore, you don't mind, can I ask your opinion of this strategy?
I think it's a great idea. My guys come in.
Figured out what kind of the net savings is gonna be?
Right now, as it stands, about $90,000. So, but it also leaves us room. If springtime comes and like between Jim and I, we decide that, you know, we just need another body for labor, we'll still have the money in the budget to do that.
I'm satisfied, thank you.
It's really just a step back. Let's see what we have. Okay, we know these guys do a great job. We know they can do a lot being on supervised. And just go from there.
Thank you.
Motion to approve.
Oh, motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Johnson, seconded by Mr. Lunder. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Wolf,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
No.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye. Ordinance number 2021-0-29. Will you read it by its title, please?
Ordinance number 2021-0-29. An ordinance levying liens for expenses incurred for lawn maintenance and or culvert repairs.
Motion to suspend.
So made.
Seconded.
Motion made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Johnson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Wolf,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Motion for passage.
So made.
Seconded.
Motion made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Lunder. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Wolf,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Any old business? Any new business?
I do have new business.
Are we doing pin the tail on the service director?
Wait
for that.
Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore? From the office of the mayor, city of Mount Lake, a proclamation in recognition and appreciation of Brent E. Moore. Whereas Brent E. Moore has served Mount Lake as a member of the Mount Lake Service Department since May 1st, 1989, and service director since June 9th, 2014, with dedication, distinction, and outstanding leadership in the vital accomplishments of the service department. And whereas he has announced his retirement as service director of the Mount Lake Service Department, effective October 29th, 2021. Whereas the city of Mount Lake wishes to extend to Brent Moore its deepest gratitude for a job well done and best wishes for many years of happiness. Now therefore, I, David R. Eaton, Mayor of the city of Mount Lake, and on behalf of City Council and all of our citizens, publicly goes on record as commending Brett Moore for his distinguished service and outstanding efforts by expressing our appreciation for his leadership in all areas of the community. Thank you.
Congratulations.
About time.
No speech.
Other new business. At this time, we will open this portion to the public. If you please step to the lectern and state your name and address for the record.
Mr. Gray, 7574 Delia Drive. So back to your ordinance you just passed. Before tonight, Ms. Hathaway was the service director secretary and the zoning secretary. So now she's no longer both duties. This is an addition. So it's just more secretarial work. Working. If I heard correctly, it was just voted on time. You're in charge, and then Jim's in charge, then Chuck and Corey. That'll be certain.
I will be absorbing my position.
This time we will close this portion. Announcements and settings of meetings. We have ordinance November 15th at 6 p.m. Park and Rec tomorrow at 7 p.m. Planning and Zoning Commission November 8th at 6 p.m. Any other meetings? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So made. Seconded.
Motion made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Shaboo. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
We are adjourned.